In today's tale, a bitter quarrel between a beautiful maiden and her mother beside an old well sends Mepo tumbling into a world few travelers have ever seen. Welcome to the Mepo Chronicles, a sanctuary of interconnected lore and rich atmospheric storytelling. This is Mepo and the Two Caskets. A long time ago, when the world was still full of strange paths and stranger wonders, a young traveler named Mepo walked along a dusty road. He had no great wealth and no grand destination. Mepo simply wandered from village to village, learning about people and the world. Some days he slept under trees, and some days, if he was lucky, he found a warm corner in a roadside inn. One afternoon, while crossing a lonely stretch of countryside, Mepo grew very thirsty. In the middle of a field stood an old stone well. Its stones were worn smooth by time, and ivy crept along its sides. Mepo lowered the bucket and drew up a pail of cool water. Just as he was about to drink, he heard angry voices somewhere down the road. A woman and a beautiful young maiden came striding toward the well. "No!" cried the maiden. "I tell you the larger share of the plunder belongs to me. I did all the work." "And I tell you it does not," snapped her mother. "I found the target and cunningly arranged the scheme." By the time they reached the well, their quarrel had become so heated that they seized each other by the sleeves. Mepo quickly set down his bucket. "Please," he said, stepping between them. "Surely this matter can be settled without fighting." But neither woman listened. The maiden shoved forward, the mother shoved back. An elbow struck Mepo sharply in the chest. Another caught him in the shoulder. He staggered backward. His heel found nothing but empty air. Before he could regain his balance, he toppled over the edge of the well. Down he fell. Yet so fiercely were the mother and daughter quarreling that neither noticed he was gone. Mepo expected cold water or hard stone, but instead he landed softly in tall grass. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a quiet meadow beneath a golden sky. Strange flowers grew everywhere, and a small, crooked house stood not far away. "Well," said Mepo thoughtfully, "if one must fall down a well, this seems a pleasant enough place to land." And so he set off across the meadow. But before he reached the house, he came upon a rickety wooden fence, leaning this way and that, as though it had grown very old and tired. As Mepo approached, the fence creaked and spoke in a thin wooden voice.
"Traveler, traveler, if you wish to cross me, do not break my boards, for I have stood here many years and never harmed anyone."
Mepo smiled.
"Do not worry, old friend," he said kindly. "I would not harm you for the world."
He walked along the fence until he found a narrow gap where the boards bent slightly apart. There he stepped carefully through without causing the smallest crack.
"Thank you,"
whispered the fence softly as he passed. Soon after, Mepo came upon a great clay oven built beside the path. From within it drifted the warm smell of fresh bread. As he drew near, the oven spoke in a deep, warm voice. "Traveler, traveler, you may take as many loaves as you wish, but do me no harm, and do not waste what you take." Mepo laughed gently.
"Bread is a fine gift,
and I will treat it with respect." He opened the oven door and chose a single white loaf, warm and fragrant. Sitting beside the oven, he ate the bread slowly and gratefully, finishing it down to the very last crumb. Then he brushed his hands clean, carefully closed the oven door, and said, "Thank you, good oven. May your loaves always bake well." With that, he continued on his way. Before long, he came upon a brown cow grazing peacefully beside the road. A small pail hung from one of her horns. When she saw him, the cow lifted her head and spoke gently. "Traveler, traveler, you may milk me and drink what you wish, but spill none upon the ground and do me no harm, for I have never harmed anyone." Mepo bowed politely. "I would be grateful for the drink." He milked the cow carefully and drank until his thirst was satisfied. Though his thirst was gone, a little milk still remained in the pail. "Now pour what is left over my hooves," said the cow, "and hang the pail upon my horn again." And Mepo did exactly as he was bid. "Thank you, kind cow," he said. "Moo," replied the cow contentedly. Mepo continued for many hours, and just as the sun was setting, he arrived at the old house. Outside, an old woman leaned against the garden gate. "Good evening," said Mepo politely.
"And a good evening to you, young man,"
answered the old woman.
"Would that all travellers were as courteous as you."
Then she looked at him for a long while.
"Well now," she said at last, "not many travellers come to my house. If you wish to stay beneath my roof, you must promise to help me with a few tasks."
Mepo nodded politely. "I would be glad to help." So Mepo stayed the night. The next morning, the old woman gave him chores that seemed impossible.
"First," she said, "sort this enormous pile of seeds before sunset. Every kind must be placed in its own bowl."
There were thousands of tiny seeds scattered across the floor. Mepo sighed and sat down to begin. As he worked, he noticed a group of little cats peeking from behind the cupboards.
"Hello there,"
Mepo said gently.
"You must live here too."
He set a few pieces of meat beside them. The cats purred happily and scurried out. Soon they were darting across the floor, sorting seeds faster than Mepo could blink. By sunset, every seed was perfectly placed. The next day, the old woman gave him another task.
"Fetch water from the stream by the forest,"
she said, handing him a bucket full of holes. Mepo examined the bucket and chuckled. "Well, that will be tricky." As he walked toward the forest, a group of frogs watched him from the edge of a pond. "Good afternoon," Mepo said kindly. "I hope I'm not disturbing your home." He then went and collected some insects and fed them to the frogs. The frogs blinked their wide eyes and croaked softly. Then, one by one, they hopped into the bucket and pressed their bodies against the holes, sealing them with their round bellies. The bucket held water perfectly. Mepo thanked them and carried the water back to the house. On the third day, the old woman brought him to a long table covered in tangled threads.
"Separate every thread by colour before nightfall," she said.
Mepo sat down and began carefully untangling them. Above him, a group of small birds watched from the rafters.
Good evening, little friends,
Mepo said.
You must have sharp eyes. I bet you see colors better than I do.
Mepo sprinkled some bread on the floor for them. The birds chirped with delight and fluttered down. With their tiny beaks, they sorted the threads into perfect piles of red, blue, yellow, and green. By sunset, the table was neatly organized. The old woman nodded slowly.
You have served me faithfully,
She said.
Everything that I asked of you, you have done willingly and well. Therefore, I shall not let your labor go unrewarded.
She led Mepo up to a loft filled with caskets of every shape and size. Some were carved with gold and jewels. Others were painted bright colors or adorned with silver.
You may choose one casket,
said the old woman.
Take it with you, but do not open it until you have left this place.
Just then, the cats, frogs, and birds quietly gathered near Mepo.
Choose the smallest one,
Meowed the cats.
The plain wooden one,
Croaked the frogs.
Not the shining ones,
Chirped the birds. Mepo looked around the room. The grandest caskets sparkled in the candlelight. One enormous chest was covered in glittering gemstones. But in the corner sat a small, simple wooden box. It was plain and worn, with no decoration at all. Mepo picked it up.
This one will do,
he said. The old woman smiled. At once the house, the meadow, and the golden sky began to fade. In the blink of an eye, Mepo found himself back beside the stone well where he had fallen. The small casket rested in his hands. Later that evening, Mepo stopped at a roadside inn. The innkeeper brought him a warm meal, and Mepo told the strange story of the well, the animals, and the mysterious house. As he finished the tale, he opened the little wooden casket. Inside, it was filled to the brim with gold coins and sparkling jewels. The innkeeper nearly dropped his mug in surprise. At another table sat the very same woman and maiden whose quarrel had sent him tumbling down the well. Though they had scarcely noticed Mepo when last they met, they paid very close attention now. And when they saw the treasure, their eyes glittered almost as brightly as the gold itself. The next morning, the mother and daughter hurried to find the old well. "Go," the charlatan woman told the maiden. "Bring us back the richest casket." The maiden climbed onto the edge of the well and jumped down. Soon she arrived in the same meadow and began walking toward the crooked house. First, she came to the old wooden fence.
Traveler, traveler,
creaked the fence.
do not break my boards.
But the maiden was impatient. She kicked the fence aside and broke several boards as she walked through. Next, she came to the oven filled with fresh bread.
You may take as many loaves as you wish,
said the oven, but do me no harm and waste none. The maiden snatched a loaf and ate half of it greedily. Then she flung the rest upon the ground and slammed the oven door so hard that it fell from its hinges. At last she reached the cow with the pail upon her horn.
You may drink as much milk as you wish, said the cow gently, but spill none upon the ground, and do me no harm.
The maiden drank the milk carelessly, spilling milk everywhere. When she finished, she tossed the pail aside and laughed loudly. Then she continued toward the house. When she arrived, it was nearly sunset. The old woman offered her the same bargain she had offered Mepo, and the maiden agreed. In the morning, the old woman asked her to sort the seeds. But when the cats appeared, the maiden wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, filthy things," she said, shooing them away. And so she was not able to finish. The old woman gave her the next task, to bring water back from the stream. But when the frogs hopped near the bucket, she kicked at them. "Out of my way!" And every drop of water poured out before she was able to return it to the house. The next day, the old woman gave her the task to untangle the threads by color. And when the birds landed nearby, she threw pebbles to chase them off. Without help, she struggled from morning until evening, yet not one task was finished. "There seems little in this world that you can do properly," said the old woman, "and still less desire have I to keep you here. Nothing that I asked has been done as it ought. Yet I will not send you away empty-handed. Go up to the loft and choose whichever casket pleases you best. But mark my words well. Do not open it until you have left this place." The young maiden scrambled to the loft. The cats peered from among the caskets, but said nothing. The frogs sat beneath the stairs and withheld their counsel. The birds watched from the rafters and made not a sound. The maiden's eyes widened at the sight of the treasures. She rushed straight to the largest and brightest casket, covered in gold and shining jewels. "This must be the best one," she said proudly. As she picked it up, the loft melted away from her, and she found herself standing by the old well once more, with the chest in her hands. Soon she found her way back to the inn, where her mother waited eagerly. Together, they set the great red casket upon the table, and, without waiting a moment longer, lifted the lid. For a moment, nothing happened. The casket seemed empty. Then, whoosh! An explosion of flames and smoke burst from the chest. The woman and her daughter screamed as soot and sparks covered them from head to toe. Their fine clothes were burnt to ruin, and their faces were blackened with soot and scorched by sparks. They ran from the inn in shame, coughing and chased by the smell of smoke which clung to them and would not wash away thereafter. Mepo, having witnessed it all, thought it better to leave his wooden casket of treasure with the innkeeper and the townsfolk, to help with damages and for their trouble. "It would only encumber my journey," he reassured the innkeeper, who hesitated accepting his gift. Mepo knew that the lessons he learned on this particular journey was worth more than all the gold in the casket. For the brightest exterior is not always the richest, and those who show kindness along the road seldom lose by it. Thank you for watching. If you like tales like these, make sure you give it a like and subscribe. I post new tales weekly.